JJK is unfortunately on break this week, but fear not because I've got your fix. Today we'll be diving into some theories and questions, but it's obviously going to be really spoilery. So if you're not caught up on the manga, we'll see you in the next one. All right, so first up today, we got this question from Gringo that says, what if Jacob's ladder perceives Yuta as a cursed object inside of Gojo and erases him? And this is really interesting. It's another one of those variables on the chessboard that could lead to some interesting results. Now, we did see Yuta fall over and collapse, so he's just sitting there. And Sukuna, I don't think, is in his immediate proximity, but it just begs the question of how big is this Jacob's ladder that Angel is unleashing right now? Is Yuta Gojo in range? And my first assumption would be that it's not in range, so he should be safe from it. But if the Jacob's ladder were to hit him, it like negates curse techniques, right? So whatever is going on inside of Gojo right now, I don't know if it's fair to call it a cursed object necessarily, because it's more just a cursed technique via kenjaku. But if Jacob ladder cancels that out, then we're left in this same interesting situation of Gojo's body, which has been healed and resuscitated, and no one in the pilot seat anymore, right? So could Gojo retake that seat? Potentially, sure. So this is the same scenario after the potential 5 minutes were up, like what was going to happen. So Jacob's ladder could be another way, to get us to that scenario. So we'll have to see. Next up, Ghosty says, do you think the Black Flash Sukuna just hit will serve as a plot device allowing him to survive next chapter? And Ghosty says what he thinks is that Sukuna, with the help of the Black Flash and a binding vow, will activate the merger and take control of it. So I think the Black Flash will certainly help Sukuna. As we know, it helps him regain output, could potentially help him regain his RCT, so it's certainly a step in the right direction for him, but I don't think that it singularly will be the explanation Gege uses for why the Jacob's Ladder doesn't just finish him outright. I think there will be more to that situation that we will uncover. And then as far as him starting the merger, I agree that if he does get backed into a corner by this, that could be the next card he plays. But as far as him like taking over and controlling the merger, I personally don't see it happening that way, just because of Sukuna's like pride, if you will. I think he would rather fight the merger himself as opposed to like using its strength, if that makes sense, which he may not even be able to. And if he's in too much of a corner and he has no other options, then sure, why not? But again, personally, I just don't see the direction going that way. He could use it as a distraction or something like that, but I do think his true intentions there are to like test himself against it after he theoretically wipes the floor with all the sorcerers. Next up, we got this prediction from Cajun, who says they'll split Sukuna, Yuji will eat him, and then Megumi will start the merger, and they'll need Sukuna to help him stop it. Yuta will land the final blow because the Six Eyes have to start the merger, and then at the end, there will be a fight inside of Yuji. So I personally don't see it happening this way, just because if they do successfully split Sukuna from Megumi, I can't see why Megumi at that point would then start the merger, because that's just like pure evil, and the only people he's hurting are his friends at that point. And yes, he's given up. Yes, he's at rock bottom, but I don't think he's taken that final turn to just be straight up malicious in the sense of like, well, since I give up on my life, now I want all my friends to die. So I just don't think there's been enough development to make that make sense at this point. And then I would find it hard to believe if they did successfully beat and capture Sukuna only to let him out. But, you know, if the merger was that dire, like maybe they would need to turn to him. But again, I don't feel like that's the direction we're going. If it was that type of situation, I think that would kind of tee up nicely for a quick Gojo moment, which I've talked about at length, so I won't bore you guys with it here. But maybe he could help them put down the merger. But we'll have to see. Next up, I'm the Real Tav says, imagine if Sukuna hops into Gojo's body if he gets split from Megumi. And that's certainly a terrifying thought. But, you know, if they do split him from Megumi, which again, I think they will, then he's presumably got to go somewhere, right? And if it's not in Yuji, which is the best case scenario, then Gojo's body is a viable target that is currently just laying inert on the battlefield right now. Now, personally, I don't think the story will go this direction because one, I don't know. I don't see Gege like bringing Gojo back a third time in Sukuna fashion. Plus, I don't think anyone would be able to beat that. Like, assuming Sukuna would be kind of refreshed or healed, if you will, in a new body like that, plus now have access to the Six Eyes and the Limitless, Like, who's stopping that? So I don't think that'll happen, but it is certainly a very juicy possibility because, again, Gojo's body is just lying there right now. Next up, we got this theory from T-Man who says, what if Kenny and Gojo both come back in Gojo's body and Gojo has to defend Kenny from like wrestling control from Yuta? And he points out some evidence here that you guys can pause to read if you'd like. And I think this would be a really gnarly idea if we got this battle between Kenjaku and Gojo kind of within the innate domain of the body, like all wrestling for control, because it would be really satisfying to get a battle between Gojo and Kenjaku, since that's like there's just so much baggage there, right, for Kenjaku taking over Geto. So I would be extremely satisfied if something like this happened, and it does kind of pave the way for some of the more interesting theories to take place via this Gojo comeback and a Kenjaku comeback via the nuance of his brain swap technique that Yuta maybe didn't know what he was getting into. So I certainly like this, and I do think it's plausible, but I don't know how likely it is we'll see it. But if we did, I would be here for it. And we got more body swap talk here, this time from David. And first of all, David, thank you for the kind words. But he says, could Gojo wake up in Yuta's body and still have the 6 eyes, but also have his high level of cursed energy, effectively making him super powerful beyond even Sukuna or his own previous body? So to answer this first, I have talked about the possibility of Gojo returning via Yuta's body. But if that does happen, I don't think he would have the 6 eyes, because technically the 6 eyes are still active in Gojo's original body right now, and as we know, there can only be one 6 eyes at a time. Now, theoretically, if original Gojo body got like completely destroyed or whatever and those 6 eyes were gone, maybe they could manifest in Yuta by some combination of the fact that he is also a descendant of the same person Gojo is, and Gojo's soul is now inhabiting him, and there is precedent for 6 eyes appearing in the past when Kenjaku referenced it. Now, I think this is very, very unlikely, but I did want to at least cover my bases and talk about that weird potential. But just, if we take everything as it is right now and Gojo comes back in Yuta's body, I do not think he would have the 6 eyes. And then for your second question on if Sukuna and Megumi are split, will Megumi have access to Maharaga thanks to Sukuna? And the answer is yes and no. Sukuna did technically tame Maharaga in Megumi's body, so Megumi's curse technique, Megumi's 10 Shadows, does have Maharaga tamed. However, Maharaga was also killed by Gojo, so Megumi will not be able to summon Maharaga. He can use it in totalities, though. Next up, we've got a longer message from Cam here, and this isn't even all of it, but y'all pause to read it if you like. You can get the gist of it from what he's saying here. And Cam, not lobotomy, man. I'm glad you shared this because I agree with you. I think binding vows are the fundamental layer behind everything in Jujutsu, and I certainly think that the original curse techniques, however many hundreds of years it was ago that the first people developed them, I think they were done with binding vows. So I'm totally on the same page with you. Next up, we got this theory from Ja on why Yuta is not able to have the same control that Kenjaku has when he body swaps, and y'all can pause to read the whole thing, but he basically equates it to Kenjaku having some sort of control over people's souls, and so that's how he's doing the nuance that he is. Now, I agree with you that there's something going on here, clearly, but I just wouldn't equate it to soul manipulation, mainly because of the conversation Kenjaku had with Mahito in the Shibuya train station all the way back. Their worldviews were basically clashing because of Kenjaku's beliefs about the body versus Mahito's beliefs about the soul. So for that reason, I don't think Kenjaku is using soul stuff to accomplish what he does, but I don't really have a good answer for what he's doing instead. I would imagine it has something to do with binding vows, though. Next up, Hip Hip wants to know if I think Sukuna has a technique reversal, and if so, why doesn't he use it? Could it be what the furnace is, or maybe he thinks it's something that is useless? And I've talked about reversals and why we don't see more of them in the series in some videos from a long time ago, and I largely just think it's something that Gege didn't dive too much into, plus not that many people would be capable of it anyway, but Sukuna obviously would, right? So does he have one? And I think theoretically yes, so the answer that makes the most sense is that he thinks it's something that's useless. Maybe it would be the ability to repair or heal things like you say. That's my best guess, and it would be really interesting to see Yuji utilize that. But no, I do not think it's the furnace. Furnace is just another innate part of the technique naturally, so not the reversal. Next, speaking of the furnace, Jay asked if Yuji can use it now that he has hit cleave and dismantle. And this is interesting. I think Yuji certainly has access to the furnace in general since it's a part of Shrine. It's more so a question of does he have the understanding to actually use it yet? And to your specific question of has he hit enough of a prerequisite use of cleave and dismantle to be able to use it, which we know is a prerequisite for Sukuna to be able to use it. And I would say he hasn't hit that many, but also we don't really know the nuance of the binding vows Sukuna had in play with Furnace, and Yuji presumably doesn't have those binding vows in play. We do know in order to use it with the domain, that kind of sets it up in general because of all the cleaves and dismantles that are getting rained out, right? If it's just a single target non-tied to the domain Furnace, we don't know exactly how many cleaves and dismantles you actually need. So I would say maybe he has, but maybe he hasn't, and maybe his wouldn't even work in that way anyway, depending on how he envisions it and how he understands it. Next up, Palazzo asks, how much time has passed in the Shinjuku showdown? And not even a day. This has been like over a year, I think, at this point, of like chapters releasing, but less than a day has passed in universe. And we know this because Sukuna and Gojo were meant to fight on Christmas Eve, and that's when the fight began. And it's really probably only been a maximum of a number of hours at this point. I would say it could have been as short as a few hours with maybe up to like 6 to 10 hours, but it's just been nonstop action, right? There hasn't really been any downtime. So I think it's still Christmas Eve, but maybe we're getting close to Christmas Day itself, depending on like what time Gojo and Sukuna actually started fighting. I do imagine we will officially cross into Christmas Day at some point, but I think Gege will let us know when that happens. And finally for this video, I got asked by Netspend, who has more aura, Netspend, Ken Carson, or Gojo? And bro, it's obviously you. I felt the presence of this donation before I even picked up my phone. Anyways, y'all, that's all for this one. Thank you to everybody who sent in a question. And don't let the fact that this is a break week get you looking like Sukuna here, because we are going to have our first ever Discord watch party. So come hang out with us for that instead. I will be releasing more details as we get them finalized, but it's likely going to be during when leaks would be anyway. So we'll still have something to look forward to. Anyways, y'all, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.